I do open the gate and then assign it to somebody else. We have to tell them.
All right, I'm gonna call the meeting to order at 11:40 a.m. Thank you for joining the Modesto Chamber of Commerce Government Relations Council meeting for the month of March. I can't believe we're through 14th quarter of the year already. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. My name is Michael Gaffney. I'm with PTE and I chair the GRC here at the Chamber.
Good afternoon, Tricia Vincent, President and CEO of the Modesto Chamber of Commerce.
John Beckman, CEO of the Building Industry Association.
Patrick Hill, Senior District Board Representative for Supervisor Randy Gray, all of Stanislaus County.
Promotions and Jim Court.
I'm Joe Cortez. I'm with the Turlock Journal.
Ramon Mendez. I'm on the welcome team with the Modesto Chamber. I do marketing for Cisco Innovations, Cat Ronald.
Phil Lyons, supportive chamberman.
Tony Severo, Public Relations and Legislative Affairs Manager for the City of Modesto. First, Goya Zacharias, Meeting Vice Chair of the Chamber of Commerce and Vice Chair of Special Event. Measure H oversight.
Michael Hinch with the Stronger Valley Act.
Susan Wallen, Mayor of Modesto.
Andrew Mendoza, President Permanente.
Tammy Dunbar, Staff Assistant to Congressmember Adam Gray, who is on his way.
Alan Zacharias, provide strategic consulting to nonprofit organizations.
Eric Fonander, City of Modesto Economic Development.
Luz Ceballos, Government Affairs Manager for Golden Valley Health Centers.
Nick DeKuzlian, Government Affairs Manager for the Save My Companies.
Justin Farkas, representing the Office of Assemblyman Juan Alanis.
Ethan Hunt, District Representative for Congressman Tom McClintock.
Cecil Russell with Sylvan Financial, the Executive Director of the Graffiti Museum, and I'm also a City of Modesto Planning Commission.
My name's Kai. I'm here with Howard Pratt, and I'm also on the welcome team for the Modesto Chamber.
Julianne Phillips, I'm District Representative for Senator Brielle Rottengill. And today with me, I brought my colleague, Alexis Chavez.
Alexis Chavez, Senator Maria Rottenville, District Rep.
Good afternoon, Dana Ferreira. I handle government affairs for Modesto Irrigation District.
Kelly Talmar, Property Manager for Managed Fair Mall, so Chamber Board. My name is Tracy Mello. I'm the Regional Senior Manager for Pacific Gas and Electric Company.
Anyone on that? Oh, please.
I'm Lisa Manatero with Congressman Andrew Gray's office, and I'm just waiting for her to go.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we again have representation from City Council, County, Assembly, Senate, and Congress, and both utilities in the room. So thank you so much for your continued support. Jennifer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. Sorry to be late. Jennifer Hidalgo, I'm the Community Relations Manager for San Antonio County.
All right. Thank you. If someone's had an opportunity to read the meeting packet, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the GRC minutes from last month.
Oh, can I make a change?
Yes.
They have Ethan listed for MID. He no longer is an intern there. He got himself a job.
I was questioning it in my mind. And I was like, did I misstate that in the minutes from last month?
So with the one change, I'll move to approve.
Okay, excellent. And I already made the change, so it will be reflected on this month's minutes. Thank you, Dana. Second? I saw Cecil's hand. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Moving into report outs with the City of Modesto, Sonia.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just recapping, we did host a joint planning commission city council meeting to discuss our City of Modesto's general plan. The upcoming next steps are to host 2 policy workshops on April 1st and 2nd, and a focus group on environmental justice on April 8th. We're working to possibly reschedule one of those to a different location of the recommendation of our council members. So as soon as we confirm those details, we'll get them out for everybody to review. And then we are going to be launching the announcement invitation soon, but the mayor's State of the City address is coming up on April 16th. So that invitation will be going out very soon.
Anything to add, Mayor?
No. I think that's, there's a lot going on
Right.
in the world.
We look forward to your State of the City address.
Thank you.
7th Street Bridge.
There's so many things I could talk about and, you know,
Feel like some people.
there's so many,
The county project needs.
so many things that are great. Crime rates going down, 0 homicides, transportation, roads being fixed. Thank you for everyone that serves on Measure H, and that's because of the residents of this community that supported and passed it. So thank you all.
Thank you. Any questions for the city or the mayor? You have a question? Okay.
What time is the State of the City?
It will be at 5:30. Doors open at 4:30, remarks at 5:30, and it'll be at the State Theater.
Thank you. 8:30, should be foods and music and all sorts of great things, 4:30 to 5:30. Some good snacks, and then my remarks will begin at 5:30, promptly at 5:30, and be done quickly.
Very nice.
Thanks, it is Thursday, it is going to be on Thursday, April 16th, State Theater. Doors open 4:30. My remarks at 5:30.
All right.
She'll send you that invitation by the end of today. So you can share them.
Broadly.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Chris Murphy, Sierra Pacific Warehouse Group, and Cecil Russell's personal private secretary. I thought it was. Yeah.
It's an unpaid position.
All right, Stanislaus County, Patrick or Jennifer?
Yeah, I can go really quickly. So yesterday, what's today? This Thursday? No, 2 days ago, it's been Wednesday. The 7th Street Bridge demolition build has started. That project is a combination of about $134 million of funding. The majority of that coming from the federal government, as well as Caltrans and the state government, and some local funding here. That project is a massively needed project. The 7th Street Bridge, as most of you know, has some severe weight limits on it, and that is for a good reason. As we have seen over the course of 100 years, the Lion Bridge, as it's more commonly referred to by a lot of residents here in Modesto, has served the community, connected the Crow's Landing area to downtown Modesto. It has become a very, very popular pedestrian crossing bridge. And if you've driven it, you know that there is no room for pedestrians. So especially when it comes to bicycles and things of that nature. We had the groundbreaking on Wednesday morning. We finished the groundbreaking with the Model Ts and Model As driving across the bridge for the very last time before the bridge was closed to traffic.
And there's a video of that on Modesto.
It was a really cool opportunity just to see a lot of community come together. That's a project that isn't just county-based, like I said. It has involvement from the city, StanCog, has involvement from the federal government and the state government. So really, it's a combination of good funding sources come together to create a bridge that's going to be 4 lanes of traffic, bicycle lanes, as well as crossing sidewalks, a 10-foot sidewalk on the western side, a 5-foot sidewalk on the eastern side. As Dave Lehman, our public works director, would like to say, the feds paid for the 5-foot sidewalk. We paid for the 10-foot sidewalk. So they wouldn't pay for anything larger than the sidewalk, so they did the eastern side. That project is, as most of you guys know, if you were to cross it, it's much needed. It's going to take some time. It's going to cost some headache. And that's part of what, the county is experiencing right now with a lot of infrastructure projects. These take some time, make some dust, but they're very, very much needed. So it was really cool to be part of that groundbreaking on Wednesday. And I wanted to just kind of add in, that's about the 3rd or 4th groundbreaking in the past couple of months on major infrastructure improvements in our county. So we're continuing to see commercial residents invest in infrastructure here in the county, and especially for the communities who need it most, the county islands and things of that nature. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, our public works team can answer.
Most important question, where are the 4 lion heads going?
That's a good one. Yeah, so the 4, they're going to try to preserve all of them if they can. I know 2 of them are slated to go into the the little park area that's gonna be down below the bridge. And I think two of them are supposed to be going to the new courthouse. I think there might be some concern.
Update on that. One of the lines is going to the Graffiti USA
That's
Museum.
correct. Yeah.
One on the southwest corner is going to the Graffiti Museum. It'll be on display for everybody at Caldwell and 9.
And they're gonna refer all of them before they.
Yes. So if there's any pictures of any supervisors on top of those lions, you guys did not see that.
It is everywhere. So. I tried to warn them. No, I was not.
Any questions for Stanislaus County? Do you have anything to add, Jennifer?
Just a really quick one. Our Parks and Recs Department is holding an Easter egg hunt on Saturday, March 28th, in the Lord Reservoir, starting at 10:30. So event for the family. There's going to be food trucks, activities, community resources, and games. So
Then for sure we add that that's probably the last one that's gonna happen.
yes, last one at Woodwood Reservoir, but we're going to be moving on to
Oh, but yeah.
come join for one last night.
All right. Moving on to an update from Assemblyman Juan Onisa's office, Justin.
All right, good morning again, everyone. I've got quite a few things to go over. I boiled it down the best I could. The first bill I want to talk to you guys about, actually, before we go into the bills, first I want to recognize that it is Women's History Month, and we're really always excited to celebrate that each year. Every year in the assembly, we do have a ceremony for that and get to select a Woman of the Year from our district. This year, Assemblyman Alanis nominated and selected Casey Young, who's the Executive Director for Stanislaus Regional 911. We're really grateful to have the opportunity to recognize her for all of her hard work, ensuring that emergency response is handled smoothly. And Assemblyman Alanis always likes to refer to our 911 dispatchers as the true first responders because they're the first one who gets all the information when an emergency arises. So we're really grateful for Casey and her leadership at Stanislaus Regional 911. Going into the legislation now, the first bill I would like to talk about is Assembly Bill 2282. This is an incredibly important bill if you have any pulse on the west side. Assembly Bill 2282 is a bill that would let a hospital provide emergency stabilization services at a standalone site, specifically in Patterson, if it meets state requirements and has an agreement to transfer patients to the nearest hospital when necessary. So one step closer to providing emergency services to residents of the west side should this bill get passed. Del Puerto Healthcare District is one of the main supporters and sponsors of this bill. So we're really excited to be working with them. The hearing for that bill is going to be April 7th. We're juggling another 19 bills besides that one right now, but another 4 or 5 have stepped forward through the process so far. The important ones I want to talk about are like Assembly Bill 1728, which will require California community colleges to integrate common course numbering for first responder related courses like for public safety, for firefighter classes. That bill was actually given to us by MJC President Brian Sanders, so we're really excited to be working with him through that. We've got a bill making it harder to get off the sex offender registry. Just a couple more steps in order to get through that process. Have a bill requiring uniform background checks for CIF referees because there is no process put in place at this time that is uniform across all school districts, across all sections of the California Interscholastic Federation. And last but not least, Assembly Bill 1698. That bill creates a tax credit for small businesses who are required to pay for employee food handler training and certification, which was a bill that passed in 2024. So all of our small business restaurateurs here in our district and across the state are being required to pay for these food handler certificates. That bill's been put on the suspense file in the Revenue and Taxation Committee, and we're expecting a hearing in April as well. Thank you, guys.
Any questions for Justin? Thank you in advance for getting one in here next month and for lunch. We look forward to seeing the Assemblyman in person. Moving on to Senator Maria Alvarado Gil's office, Alexis or Julian?
Good afternoon, all. My name is Julianne Phillips on behalf of Senator Alvarado Gill. Brief legislative update. Since we last met, the senator has co-authored AB 1745, which will temporarily suspend the state gas tax for 1 year. The senator also held a press conference on Tuesday highlighting her wildfire reduction in insurance affordability package. This is a package of 3 bills to help lessen the burden on insurance companies to provide wildfire insurance and also offset some of the costs in some of our areas that are impacted by wildfires. That's SB 1162 that directs the Department of Forestry and Cal Fire to prioritize the state-funded vegetation management projects in high-density fair plan areas to reduce wildfire risk and lower liability exposure and stabilize the insurance markets in those most vulnerable communities. We also have SB 1084, which provides a personal income tax credit to offset the costs of qualified home hardening projects, such as ember-resistant vents, fire-resistant roofing, and defensible space enhancements. And SB 1118, which offers a tax credit for the purchase of backup electricity generators for solar battery storage systems. And those are $1,500 and $3,000 respectively. Also on another note, we will start accepting nominations for nonprofit of the year. This year's theme is transforming loss into legacy. So if you know of a nonprofit organization in the community that is sort of made in memoriam of an individual and is continuing to enhance their legacy throughout the community by supporting community projects, scholarship programs, and things of that nature, we are accepting nominations through, I believe, April 9th. So please let me know if you'd like any information on that. Wonderful. I'll email you on.
And if you forward it over, we can send it out. We can distribute it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Forward it to Trish.
Yeah, we'll send it out.
On our Any questions for Julianne? You're welcome. All right, moving into Congressman Tom McClintock's office for Ethan's first report out.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan. Again, I'm with Congressman Tom McClintock, not MID, though I appreciated my time with Dana greatly. So I have a couple updates on some pieces of legislation here. The first is the farm bill that the Congress has been working on. So it has been marked up and should be coming to the House floor within the next 4 to 6 weeks for a vote. And included in this bill are 2 pieces of legislation that the Congressman worked on. The first is they're both pertaining to forest fire mitigation. First is the Fix Our Forest Act, which aims to accelerate forest management projects by streamlining environmental reviews. So they don't take as long and they can actually start working on the fire quickly. And the second is the Put Out the Fire Act, which aims to do something similar and it will require the Forest Service to take immediate action on a fire that they have detected within 24 hours. So second is a bill pertaining to sanctuary cities. This bill would it's already made out of committee and it should restrict sanctuary cities from interfering with local law enforcement agencies that do want to cooperate with the federal government and work with federal authorities. And it will allow these local law enforcement agencies to actually cooperate and work with them should they choose to do so, and aims to direct funding directly to those agencies themselves as well. And then finally, this should make our irrigation district friends happy. The Department of Interior announced $540 million in federal funding for water infrastructure in California with a specific focus on the Central Valley itself. So that should be really good for our area here. So that's all I have today.
All right. Nice job. Any questions for Ethan? Skip over to Congressman Gray's office for obvious reasons. Moving into utility updates. Who wants to, Rochambeau, to see who goes first?
You can go first.
M comes before P.
Get your boss here.
Or now then.
And I was supposed to just observe, but that's all right. I also thank you for letting me go. Again, my name is Trace Bell. I'm the regional senior manager for PG&E. Just as a high level, it's funny, I was talking with Kelly here next to me before the meeting started. We talked about weather boomerang, right? So we have gone from a low snow winter event a couple weeks ago, which impacted over 15,000 of our customers. where we had to do that restoration and safety work up there to a train derailment that took down a couple of transmission towers in Stockton. And then just a couple of days ago, a crane going into our transmission over on the Altamont Pass. So a lot of things going on, and now we have shifted into almost 100-degree weather, right? So we're dealing with that. So our operational folks are out there working tirelessly to restore and ensure that folks stay from power. But mostly I wanted to thank MID for the partnership with the work that we had to do with moving some of our gas infrastructure to get out of the way for the North Corridor project for Stan County. So that work has been completed and we really appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
Now it's your turn to thank us.
So we are, irrigation season has started. If you haven't heard, we are at 42 inches uncapped, which will trigger the long-term groundwater replenishment program. As mentioned, we are experiencing a heat wave, and unfortunately, our largest reservoir, aka the snowpack, is melting faster than anticipated. But we're still at 42 uncapped. So good irrigation season.
Pretty good. All right, I don't see Todd here with Visit Modesto. I think Almond Blossom is wrapped up. He probably has allergies like crazy. BIA, John?
Home building is still struggling due to high mortgage rates, but other than that, here in the Stanislaus County, things are mostly on an even keel. It's not too far out of whack as far as what I would say is a normal time for us right now.
I can give a quick update for Visit Modesto.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Visit Modesto, our last recent reports, Almond Blossom Festival was quick this year. It was, very cold, and Autumn Blossoms were about 2.5 weeks. So it condensed the time of visitation. You still had an uptick in local visitors. And moving on now to the summer festivals like Garage Fest and things like that, and Art Walk, which was last night. The key thing is that the travel market is down in California. International travel is way down. 28% right now to the state of California for international travel. And we're doing better than most. Some of the states have just gone dry. The key metric we're looking at is we are outperforming our adjacent markets. And that's what we measure up against. In terms of Salida, Turlock, and those surrounding areas, we are on the plus side. In a down market, we're on a plus side compared to our local competition areas outside of Modesto. And the only area that's had any plus this year has been the metro market of San Francisco and Sacramento. So we're starting to see signs of life there, but the hotels are waiting. They're really nervous about business travel right now. So business travel is the key concern going in, but that's the multi-day, multi-stay business that affects our area. So that's a quick update from Visit Modesto. We had our board meeting yesterday. So that's the Reader's Digest version.
Great. Thank you. John, if you're listening in, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, John Valines with Modesto Gospel Mission, and also I am the chair of the EDC. Glad to be here. Sorry I couldn't be in person.
No problem. I think next month's presenter is Jessica Hill, City Modesto Director of Community and Economic Development. Right?
That's correct.
We look forward to seeing her. That's the first Wednesday of the month, April 1st. Other business or announcements? Trish, do you want to let us know what the new date of the Chamber Awards event is?
So we will be holding our Champions of the Chamber event on Thursday, April 30th. We are holding it at the Century. It will be a little bit of a networking social environment, bringing back some of our restaurant members to providing food samplings and small bites. I'm looking forward to that. We will be launching Leadership Modesto Alumni Network, the concept and invitation to engage with us at that event. And we will be presenting the Welcome Team Ambassador Team Members of the Year Award, our previous Leadership Modesto Classmate of the Year Award. And that's a tongue twister for some reason today. And just looking forward to having a great evening. So tickets and sponsorships are available for that. And just follow us with everything else. We have something happening pretty much every week.
And just one final thing. Yes, Modesto Marathon is this weekend. It's Sunday morning, early, 7:30. So get out there and support these runners. Shouldn't get hot till about 10. The key thing is tomorrow is bag and packet pickup. So if you want to go there, it's happening all at the Graffiti USA Museum. So all 3,000 entrants will be at the Graffiti Museum. If you want to go check out to see the pre-race activity and the exhibit area, definitely do that tomorrow and celebrate the marathon.
Excellent. I'm only running the half. You can cheer me on until eight forty-two. All right, born and raised in Merced, Adam Gray grew up working in his family's dairy supply and feed store, where he learned firsthand the values of hard work, integrity, and looking out for his neighbors. His family has lived and worked in the Central Valley for generations, and Adam attended local schools before building a career dedicated to serving the region he calls home. Today, Adam represents California's 13th congressional district in the United States of Representatives, where he is focused on lowering costs for Valley families, strengthening the region's water supply, supporting agriculture, and expanding access to health care. So without further ado, Adam, the floor is yours. I'm glad you landed and made it back home safely.
Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing from you. So.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the nice words, although that sounded a little bit like the one we wrote for you. So I guess it's our nice words, but thank you for the introduction. It's wonderful to be home. For a Californian, every time you get back in beautiful California weather from Washington, D.C., which has about 3 days of good weather a year, as far as I can tell, after being there for a year now. It has been a really interesting first year in Congress. And that's kind of the understatement of the year, I guess. Many of you worked with me, and I certainly worked close with the chamber during my 10 years in the state legislature representing this community. And I think many of you, know I grew up in Merced, represented Merced County, Stanislaus County, and was one of the kind of leading moderate voices in the state legislature. I was the chairman of a group called the New Democratic Coalition, which was the more moderate Democrats. I always joke with my Republican friends that here in California, we have two parties, liberal Democrats and moderate Democrats. But, in Sacramento, we work to, steer a middle course, but also to kind of embrace bipartisanship, right? As a good in itself, right? That public policy is better, communities are better served when you engage the entire community and when you engage both political parties in the lawmaking process. And so to arrive in Washington, D.C., which even when I was campaigning for office, I certainly was not naive to the fact that Washington had a partisanship problem. It is more partisan and worse than I could have imagined. It has been in this first year just a complete lack of desire even really for bipartisanship. And anyone who tells you it's one party or the other to blame is lying to you, because it's certainly both parties. And I can tell you, as probably one of the most conservative members of my caucus, back in Washington, even I haven't received a whole lot of gestures from the other party, people reaching across the aisle asking you to work together with them on important issues. And that's been, frustrating and certainly a little different than the work I did in the state legislature. But I've kind of maintained my hope and certainly my belief in bipartisanship. I've co-sponsored bills. I was one of, I think, 6 or 7 Democrats to vote to reopen the government. I was one of 6 Democrats to vote on a bipartisan farm bill that we just got done this last month. So I've still consistently been making the effort to try to find those opportunities to work together, bring people together, because certainly the Capitol needs it. I mean, it is to the point in Washington, this was not true in Sacramento, that Democrats and Republicans don't go to the same restaurants. They don't go to the same cocktail parties. It is that divided. And you don't get your member briefings together. You don't get, your training together. It's just, it's extraordinarily divided town, and it's unhealthy, frankly, for the country. And people aren't doing enough. But that's become, I guess I went there with a passion to kind of bring that type of politics, more pragmatic politics, interested in working with both parties, interested in focusing on your district before your party, right? As everyone should. And if you're from a large city, you should represent the interest of large cities. If you're from a rural community, you should put the interest of rural communities first. If you're from an agricultural community, that should be important, right? But very partisan town, very difficult. The Farm Bill is a work in progress. That's going to have a huge potential impact in the area. I don't know that we're actually going to get one done. The House got it out of the Ag Committee. It goes to rules. I don't know that it has the votes to get to the floor. And the reason for that largely is that the Farm Bill has always been tied to nutrition funding, right? And as a way of kind of marrying the interest of urban communities and rural communities, by saying we're going to take all of our funding for SNAP and other nutrition programs, that funds school lunches, that funds food banks, et cetera, and we're going to tie it to subsidies and incentives and ag research and things that farming communities care deeply about. And when the Republicans did depending on if you talk to a Democrat or Republican, if you talk to a Republican, they'll call it Trump's big, beautiful bill. And if you talk to a Democrat, they'll call it, his stupid bill or his dumbass deal or something. And that bill decimated funding for nutrition, cut it substantially in a way that putting the Farm Bill together with that same kind of compromise, incentives on both ends wasn't really possible. And there wasn't much money to spend in it. One of my big issues working with my Republican colleagues was try to get a little bit more policy change and funding on the specialty crops, which of course is what we do in California, much different than the Midwest or the Northeast or some of these other corridors. So we were successful in doing that. We got a pretty good bill put together with some funding that I think farmers really need right now, given the tariffs, given the high fuel costs right now, what we see with fertilizer, the trade issues, not to mention the labor force and workforce issues, right? With the total lack of any kind of immigration reform or compromise. And so challenging time, potentially get a deal done. It's going to really depend on what happens in the Senate. And this is, at least on the legislative side, a lot of what you've read about throughout the year seems to be the president and the executive kind of exercising the will of the president. You've not seen a whole lot of big legislative deals. And really the reason for that is that the Senate, as we're all aware, has filibuster, right? And the Senate was designed, in fact, to kind of force both parties, no matter who's in charge, to have to speak to the other party, right? That's essentially what the filibuster accomplishes. And because there's been so little appetite, to have any kind of like real bipartisan consensus on some of these big issues, we've not gotten bills to a place where they can actually pass through the Senate easily. You're seeing that on almost every big bill. The House will put out something, usually along partisan lines, goes to the Senate, and it's just kind of dying because the only way to get through the Senate is to have some kind of compromise effort, and that's what's really lacking in the town right now. Some of the highlights are things that we are working on that I think are really important. I'm co-sponsoring the SPEED Act, and this is, has anyone read the book Abundance or read anything about the book Abundance? A couple people. There's been a lot of attention, kind of started with Ezra Klein, who's a columnist in the New York Times, fairly progressive columnist. So he wrote a book along with Derek Thompson, who's a contributor to Atlantic Magazine. And the whole idea is that they kind of come at it from a somewhat, I guess, more progressive point of view, but that if we want to do things to deal with climate change and some of these other big issues that a lot of progressive people care deeply about, we've got to be able to build solutions. And that the very laws that we've put in place to protect the environment have stalled the very solutions we need in renewable energy and other things. And it's a really interesting discussion about that. And they get into some real specific, talk a lot about California, actually, like our high-speed rail project and some of the other big projects that have been delayed kind of indefinitely in our state by some of our laws. But the SPEED Act is National Environmental Protection Act reform. And it's a really good piece of legislation. It makes very reasonable adjustments to NEPA to try and make it easier to build things. It's bipartisan. I'm a lead co-sponsor with Bruce Westerman from Arkansas. And that's another one that we got out of the House in pretty good shape. Could have been better. and now is stuck in the Senate. Because outside of myself and a few other Blue Dog Democrats, the Republicans haven't been able to achieve, much bipartisanship there, mostly around renewable energy. This story will illustrate kind of what goes on in Washington right now. We got the bill to the floor, and we got the bill to the floor technology neutral, meaning that we were going to speed up the permitting process for all projects, whether it's an oil and gas project, wind, solar, etc. The House Freedom Caucus, which is kind of the very pro-Trump crowd, very conservative group, insisted on an amendment to the bill on the House floor that basically did like a Trump exception, that he could cancel any project he wants to cancel, regardless, of technology. But then of course goes over to the Senate, and it's stuck there because that kind of blew up the bipartisan effort there. It's like, okay, we'll not mess with oil and gas, but we'll also embrace other types of energy. And then again, from my perspective, I was actually trying to put more stuff in it. And this is kind of an amusing situation. I was trying to add things to the bill in respect to water projects. Many of you know I've worked on water infrastructure coming out of an ag valley for years, and I'm hugely frustrated that we've not been able to move water projects forward. But I couldn't get the Republicans, some of the stuff I wanted to do, they weren't willing to go as far as I was, which just shows you how politics can certainly create strange dynamics. But some really great stuff on energy production, in the Senate. And hopefully that's one that maybe we could land, towards the end of the year and start to build things again to whatever your end is, whether it's, a climate change issue, wanting to invest in more renewable energy, whether it's trying to bring chips manufacturing, back to the country, both for national security and for jobs here, in our own country. All those things are held up by just the bureaucracy and the red tape. And as the business people in this room, I'm sure know, you've dealt with plenty of bureaucracy over the course of, your day-to-day efforts. And we can't start building and we can't grow our economy that way. It's going to be really dangerous. Probably the topic of the day that I'm sure everyone's seeing on the news 24/7 is Iran. My take on Iran is that regime 100% has been not only a thorn in our side, but a danger to the world for many decades. But this president did himself no favors, did our country no favors by making no effort whatsoever to even talk to Congress or the American people, for that matter, about getting involved in this. And now we're seeing the kind of unknown consequences of being involved in this war with the Strait, with oil prices. It was 110, 120 bucks a barrel up to and still going up, and no end in sight. So I voted once on a war powers resolution that was bipartisan, along with Senator Rand Paul from the Senate, to bring in, to require the president to come to Congress and get a vote, to continue this war, and if not, to pull out. That failed on the House floor. There's a couple other efforts we've signed on to in different compromise approaches. But I remain pretty concerned that there just doesn't seem to be a plan here. Again, not against doing something to deal with Iran. If we have a plan, we're going to go in and we're going to execute it. There's a legitimate danger, near-term danger that was different and unique, but none of us know because nobody's giving us any information. And I'll tell you just again, because I really want to just leave you with the understanding of how important it is that all of us as voters and as citizens really start to pressure all of our elected representatives, not just me, but members of Congress and even members of our local legislature, to really root this partisanship out. Even when we go into the national security briefings, which I can't tell you about because they're national security briefings, it's partisan. As absurd as that sounds, you'd think we'd be sitting in a room and getting important information, weighing difficult issues, having difficult conversations, and instead it's a bit of a partisan show. And that's just how disappointing the culture is back there. And I don't think the fix is back there. I think the fix is back here at home. I think regular voters on both sides of the aisle have to start holding leaders accountable. I was on the news just recently and they said, was there any message you want to give to voters? I said, well, my message is anybody, any politician who tells you that the entire problem is the other party, you should fire them. Whoever that is of either party, that's the person that needs to be fired immediately. Because the problems are obviously much more complicated than that. There's plenty of blame to go around, but there's also plenty of room for everybody to start working together, putting our country first, putting the communities first, and not letting us lead with our party. So I'll stop there. It's just a little bit of a year in review, obviously moving into my second year in Congress. And, and again, despite my frustration on the partisanship, I'm going to continue to, reach my hand across the aisle every opportunity I get to try to lead by example in ways that I can. And on other things where I feel like I got to stand my ground, if I think something doesn't make sense, as I've said, like on this current war in Iran, where I just fundamentally disagree, not necessarily with holding Iran accountable, but I disagree with not dealing with Congress, the American people, not having a plan. And I stand up and say so. So that's kind of been the year. I'm going to continue to work on your behalf, put our community first, fight for agriculture, fight for water, fight for rural education, to continue to try to grow the opportunities around UC Merced and agriculture technology and the opportunities in our local counties and cities. And I think there's a lot of good stuff happening. And as I said during my campaign, when I quoted former President Clinton, there's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed by what's right with America. What's right with America are the American people on both sides of the aisle. So I remain hopeful in that sense, and it's an honor to represent you all in Washington. Thank you for the opportunity and the opportunity to be here with you here today. So any questions?
So our own Mary Ann Canton at a speech said blame is not a strategy for change. Pretty much what you're saying.
I like that.
Yeah, you can use that, but I'll make sure you can. But my other question is, you didn't comment about the SAVE Act.
Yeah, sitting in the Senate, and that's kind of filibusters floating around that discussion. The SAVE Act is another one. Well, I'll be very direct and very straight. We have a Republican administration. Every U.S. attorney in the country works for Donald Trump. And have any of us picked up the newspaper and read about the dozens or hundreds of prosecutions across the country for fraudulent voting? Currently against the law. So if somebody's broken the law, you can prosecute. That's because it's not happening at the scale of this huge problem. Having said that, we end up in a partisan fight over one party say, oh, we need voter ID, which anyone who's, studied history in high school knows this country's had tons of problems over requirements around voting through racial segregation, everything else, and Jim Crow laws and all kinds of stuff. So there's a bad history there that has to be addressed just out in the open, right? And at the same time, does it seem reasonable to any of us that you shouldn't be able to have an ID and vote? I can get into my bank account on my iPhone. So I think, as Americans, we could certainly figure out a secure way, but I don't think we can get past the partisan talking points. There's dishonesty on the right about the issue and how much of a problem it even is, and a total unwillingness to acknowledge that if we're going to address it, we got to address it in a way that seems fair and equitable to all communities. And then, I think to the folks on the far left, the total unwillingness to just even engage in a discussion about, well, what would be reasonable as a form of ID is also inappropriate.
Well, it's not a clean bill either, is it?
No, it's not a clean. If
it was just a clean bill, the Senate said they would pass it.
Yeah, I think it's a problem we could solve. I guess is the point I'm trying to drive. If people would sit down on both sides and be honest with each other about the discussion, instead of it being a political, the Republicans want to say Democrats want everyone to vote who can't vote. And so they want to draft a bill that no Democrat's ever going to vote for and then yell and scream about it. I hope to God they don't blow up the filibuster. And I'm one of the few people, I think, in my party that still feels as strongly about this, but as somebody who represents a rural community here in California, I care deeply about us being protected in a sense against the tyranny of the majority. Right. And I don't think people think deeply about that issue much, but the filibuster is tough and it's sticky and it allows any one senator to hold up progress. But by that same token, it forces us all to work together, right, to achieve progress. And I guess I would, consistent with my comments all day long here, I believe in working together. And so I think tools that we have that force us to sit down and talk to each other should be kept in place. And I hope to God they don't blow it up. There's certainly plenty of people in my party who would embrace them blowing it up, so we don't have to have it when Democrats take charge of the Senate. But I think it'd be bad for the country.
In regards to the national security briefings, and you mentioned that you're hearing them based on party, how long has that been going on? And is that the behest of the administration? Is it leadership? Is it the first year, or has this been going on for 10 years?
Yeah, it's definitely a question I kind of keep asking myself. And, as you know, I know some of our old members of Congress. So
Right.
I've been picking up the phone and trying to talk to people and get a sense of if what I'm experiencing is unique in this time and moment. I've gotten different perspectives from each member of Congress, going back to Tony Coelho, who served in the 1980s. And it definitely feels that the honest truth is that it's creeped that way. And also that this particular president, with his particular personality and his particular style, has maybe made it an all-time kind of worse as far as, not having any kind of bipartisan, approach and using kind of inflammatory language and just to illustrate what I mean when I say it's not bipartisan, we'll sit in a room and there'll be a table and you'll have the Secretary of State and the generals and the CIA director, and they'll give reports. That you can imagine most of the reports are kind of technical in a way that the average layperson, if we wouldn't begin to understand exactly what they're, referring to or not. And then there's two columns in this big auditorium, and they each have a microphone, and Democrats and Republicans get up and go up to the microphones to ask questions, right, of these panelists who each got to speak for 2 minutes or something. And, and a Republican will go up and say something like, Donald Trump's the greatest human being who's ever walked the earth, and, we should write a Bible about him, and he's handling this incredibly. And then all the Republicans will clap. And then a Democrat will go up and say, this is terrible, and you're breaking the law, and and all the Democrats will clap. Which the first one I was in, I was sitting there not clapping at all. And I thought to myself, is there an audience? Like, who are we clapping for? You have to be a member of Congress and you had to go through a security sweep to get in the room, right? That's embarrassing. And I think I would hope we would all be embarrassed by that, regardless of our own party affiliation, right? And so it's just really wild. And I do think some of it's personality and culture that exists in the country right now. And we've amped ourselves up to see each other as enemies. And I think politics has gone on a kind of a skid where we've gone from questioning each other's ideas, right? Like I'm a small government, low tax person, right? And you're a big government, big tax person. That's right. And now it's questioning each other's character, right? And when you question somebody's character, it becomes awfully hard to have a conversation about a solution, right? And so I think we really got to rethink that. And again, I think we're going to drive culture, not our politics or Washington, D.C. So do you think that's part of it?
Yeah. About opening PHS, paying TSA. Crazy though, TSA agent.
Yeah, it is crazy that, and again, that's kind of a modern government thing, right? Like I think the number of government shutdowns pre-1980 are like 0. And then, in the last 5 years, we've had, 4 or 5 or whatever, right? So that's obviously, just from that data alone, this is a symptom of our times, right? Inability to talk to each other. And I'll share with you this story. I got a letter, well, I and all of the members of Congress got a letter from, Tom Homan, talking about the DHS and, well, largely not just, DHS funding issue, but obviously including TSA and other things. And, the letter said a bunch of inflammatory language about how, Democrats are ruining the country, da, da, da. And then kind of like at the bottom of it proceeds to talk about some kind of like offerings from the administration, like, we would agree to. Well, several of the things like we would agree to follow the current law on blah, 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 blah. Which again, I mean, are we serious people? You're agreeing to follow that's a concession that you're going to follow the law? It's embarrassing. And it wasn't meant to, the letter itself and the language of the letter wasn't meant to achieve some kind of a compromise solution to reopen the government. It was just meant to, stir up more controversy and emotions. But I don't think we should operate this way, period. I think we ought to figure out how to rework how we fund the government so that we're not holding, regular Americans and their paychecks while they're working at our own safety in harm's way. I think we got to figure out a way to work out our differences. And again, I mean, I'm not sure what that looks like, right? Do we have to go to a 2/3 vote on everything so that we grind the government to a complete halt until we all learn to get along? Or what do we got to do, to make that work? And I think that's a big question of the day that needs to be solved. And I hope at least the attitude I'm bringing about being clear and honest and being bipartisan with every opportunity that I can find will help lead by example, change the culture one at a time. Because it's not healthy, it's not good, and I think it's a real problem. And I feel bad for the families that are impacted.
Well, it's hard being a constituent, and what do? So we write you a letter and say, figure this out, get them paid, but nothing happens.
Well, that's why
Very frustrating.
that's why I said that message on TV about like, if any politician, and when I'm speaking to people, it's kind of like, start looking at your own party. Don't look at the other party. Look at the people in your own party that are a problem and say something out loud about it, right? I mean, I've certainly been critical of my own party many times, right? And will continue to be when I think they're wrong. When I think they're right, I'll say so. When I think they're wrong, I'll say. And I just think we've got to get that culture back. And it is absent. I'm part of the Blue Dog Caucus, which many of our members of Congress and I have been part of the Blue Dog Caucus since it started in 1995. I think Mike was there when it started. Weren't you there when it started? Yeah, the original Blue Dog Caucus.
You did a good job on it.
But I keep saying we need a Red Dog Caucus too. But we need a group on the Republican side that is equally committed to kind of, we're good Republicans, but not just going to be rubber stamps for their party. And then we need to get the two groups together and really start to challenge the way the place is being governed, because it really is bad.
Do you think there's any opportunity to separate TSC from DHS in the next couple of days?
It's all.
That's a regular flyer, I'm asking.
Next week's trip.
It's all going to play out in the Senate. And it's kind of hard to, that's another interesting thing. The House and the Senate are very different. You'd think that you're kind of all working together, but you don't really run in any of the same circles. So I'm, as it comes to the Senate, I feel like I get the same information you probably get when I turn on the TV in the morning. Based on, that recent letter I was just telling the story about, it doesn't feel like the Republicans have gotten to a place yet where they want to do any type of compromise. Although on the other hand, and then I guess to some degree, the Iran stuff has been kind of maybe a distraction from that, right? Like if we weren't at war with Iran, gas wasn't, going up by the day, there might be more public scrutiny or attention or a sense of like, we got to do something about this. And maybe that, and I guess that could cut both ways. It could incentivize them to solve the problem, or it allows them to kind of ignore the problem while the focus is on Iran. But I fly twice a week, 8 hours across the country, so I see it firsthand, what's happening and what people are being impacted by.
So, a question I have, earlier you were talking about bipartisanship. McClintock is our other congressman for some of our area here. And both of you seem to be on the agriculture committee, water and that infrastructure and that. What, but not putting you on the spot, is there a relationship there?
I certainly, yeah, I mean, I've known McClintock for many years, and some of you may remember when I organized the Stop the Water Grab rally in Sacramento at the Capitol steps, and he came up and participated along with some of our other Republican colleagues, and so I've had a working relationship. I don't want to speak for Congressman McClintock. I think he has a very different point of view than I don't think he would get up here and give you the perspective on the importance of bipartisanship.
But water and agriculture is this area.
And I think those are areas where I certainly feel like he and I have worked together, have a working relationship, right?
We both did a joint letter for MID.
We just did a letter together.
So
That's right.
thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think on those, and I guess that probably is the place where it's easiest to work collaboratively. It's despite any kind of partisan relationship, is when you're working on issues that really impact the community and you're both putting the community first, then that makes a lot of sense. Some of the other issues, I know he has some pretty deeply held beliefs about the Constitution and kind of the way government operates, and that's why I'm not sure we probably all see it, but we haven't sat and talked.
Well, to your point, it's can you separate your party here and party here when it's something that you both have in common? And can you, because I think that's the way you get to compromise, is build a relationship on things that you have in common. He and I don't get along on a lot of things, okay? But the things that we do, just lays our focus,
Well, and that's where spending time together is important too. Right. And knowing somebody as a person, knowing somebody's family. I think that's one of the things that's probably a little bit broken about Washington now too, is that post kind of Newt Gingrich and the Contract for America, for anybody who remembers that, a lot of the focus of the Contract for America was about, we got to get members out of Washington. They got to go back home. And it used to be, you have all these members who lived in Washington, their kids went to school, rather than flying home and seeing your kids on the weekend, you'd have your kids with you and your family with you all week. And they go to school in Washington. And so my kids went to school with McClintock's kids and this and that, so on and so forth. That doesn't occur anymore. Now everybody's in, out. And then when you couple on, or you put on top of that, not going to the same bars and restaurants. I went into does anyone know the Capitol Grill? Yeah. I like the Capitol Grill. Dennis Cardoza took me to the Capitol Grill the first time when I was probably in my.
And has all 3 networks on the TV in there.
And it's a nice restaurant close to the Capitol. And so the first couple of weeks I'm in Washington, I go to the Capitol Grill by myself to have dinner. And I walk in and it was like one of those head turning things, right? And everyone's staring at me. I'm like, what the hell is this? And it's because it's a Republican hangout now. I told them I like the steaks, so I'll pull up a seat at the bar and you guys have to deal with me. But it's that kind of stuff. Yeah, spend time with the family, getting those person, be able to communicate, certainly working on local issues. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think we've done that historically in our area pretty good. With most of our representatives on both sides of the aisle. I think our area is much less, even though I've spent a lot of time talking about it today, our area is much less the problem than many other parts of the country that don't have the same culture. When you think back, whether it's Ken Maddie or Gary Condon, Dennis Cardoza, Jeff Dad, just go through a laundry list of legislators in our region who have generally been pretty good about trying to find some common ground. But I would argue 90% of the country is not having that same kind of culture.
What advice would you give our region? I'm in the agriculture, logistics, warehousing business. So our growers and farmers are getting hammered. The tariffs are all over the place. what advice would you give our region? Like, how can we create like an overweight zone so we can bring this economy closer to us? Or free trade zones? I mean, what direction would you give us so we can strengthen our piece? Because I don't want to be the one that gets lost at the table to the Bay Area. What ways do you think we should strengthen that part of our economy? And how can you help with those directions, you know?
Well, I think, we've got to find some different directions on trade, tariffs. We've got to do a much better job of educating more urban communities about the importance of agriculture. I mean, one of the problems we're seeing, a lot of the very specific problems to California agriculture are not being addressed right now because California is a blue state. And it's a Republican majority, and so in private one-on-one conversation, people say, "Oh, no, we get it, but we just can't make this, a priority." So I think, again, building some relationships, educating people outside of what is the largest agricultural valley in the world and most productive, right? Which I remind everybody of every ag committee. It's the first thing that comes out of my mouth. I look at all my Midwest people, everyone else, I say, we are the biggest and the best.
Separated by 132.
But we got to go, we got to build that support. And again, we got to take down, we're suffering from the partisanship right now. This year, the troubles, agriculture seeing is because if you're on the Republican side of the aisle, you can't say anything about some of the obvious problems, that have occurred with lack of immigration reform, the immigration enforcement that has gone on, the tariffs, the trade issues, the rhetoric. I mean, there's people, I know some citrus folks that had lost a massive contract with a Canadian grocery store chain that now is sourcing from Portugal and isn't coming back to us probably for a long time, right? And that's specifically around consumer sentiment, not even trade policy. It is trade policy, but it's also consumer sentiment. The wine industry, Gallo's hugely important, obviously, to our local economy. You can't find American wine on Canadian shelves. Huge problem, So again, like that's why I guess because we're an independent area, because we've had a history of working, with both parties and all that, I think we just all got to make a real effort to talk honestly, not overstate the case and be partisan about it, but just honestly about what are the impacts. And there are many people in our community who know them well, because including yourself, who deal with this day in and day out, just the practical realities of what's happening.
So on the topic of tariffs, because the chamber just hosted a tariffs roundtable discussion with our Attorney General yesterday. Rob says hi, by the way. He asked us 2 questions, and I think 4 of the probably 8 or 10 participants.
There was about 10.
We're in this room. He asked us 2 questions. I'd like to ask you one of them. What impacts are you already seeing from the current administration's tariff policy? And most importantly, what impacts are you bracing for?
Well, since something different happens almost every other day, I constantly brace for who knows what the hell. What I'm seeing with tariffs is lost. What I was just talking about with just the consumer sentiment, is people aren't that we're losing markets, which can be a long-term problem. The tariffs in agriculture, I think, are more damaging in that sense than, like, you get into some of the different consumer products, and like China's been sucking up a lot of the eating a lot of the cost on the tariffs, essentially. When you're talking about, your Walmart and your Targets or if you're building a hotel and sourcing, furniture, right? Agriculture, I think, essentially different because, these trade relationships, people are moving markets, and people also aren't able to make thoughtful decisions, going forward on what we're gonna, how much we're farming, what we're farming. And then now, obviously more the relationship with the workforce is different too, right? I mean, you're seeing, crews not show up, seasonal crews not show up from other states. There's no real prospective solution on the table. Well, there are some solutions. The Farm Worker Modernization Act is in Congress right now, the Dignity Act. Both of those bills, by the way, have an equal number of Democrat and Republican authors. So when you talk about, well, what are the solutions? I would start to point immediately to things where we already have bipartisan support, right? We just got to bring that to the floor. But the respective party leaderships for different reasons at different times don't want to bring, those kind of compromise pieces, to the floor. I don't know. It doesn't feel like we have a whole lot of near-term prospects. I introduced legislation to try to treat, this speaks to your question, agricultural products differently under tariffs. Haven't been able to get that to move at all. There's been 8 or 9 other proposals, tariff related, and then of course the Supreme Court stepped in on tariffs, which now we're just, but now nobody knows who's got to pay who, and there's no hammer to tell anyone who to pay, and we're into more litigation and more time. I don't see any legislative solution that's gonna calm the waters for agriculture this year. Honestly, kind of think, and again, I'm a bit, I'm a fan in a sense of divided government and people, as I've said throughout the day, being forced to work together. I think we're going to have to some degree get through the midterm elections and see where things sit. And if Democrats control the House and Republicans control the Senate and President Trump was an executive, then that'll be the first step in folks having to sit down and kind of start to repair the damage, whether it be lost, revenue or whether it be lost markets. And then the one maybe other piece of that is, can we get the farm bill done in the next 6 months, right? Which could, one of the things I talked to Chairman Thompson about was we did a big kind of like bailout package for farmers, but of the $12 billion in that particular package, $1 billion went to specialty crops, which is most of what we have here in California, right? So one of the things I asked for in the farm bill discussions was recognizing we're not spending more money in that. There's going to be another relief package, I would think. And I think politically, like the president's going to want another relief package. And I made the appeal to the chairman, like, I'm going to vote with you guys. We're going to do a bipartisan farm bill, but we need serious consideration in the next relief package for real money to help our folks who are navigating those, tariffs.
What are the implications for you specifically as a representative of this district, the outmigration of wealth from California and corporations to more hospitable tax environments? What are the long-term implications for California? We've always been kind of a trailblazer on causes and taking up issues that are beneficial for the whole country. We've lost that moniker. And it's not just the uber wealthy that we're always gunning for, but the next tier is just below it, and then the tier below it. It's a chain reaction that's happening. What are the implications from your vantage point, and how do we curtail that? Because it does no favor to the idea of divided government, certainly in the state of California.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of attention and almost kind of an obsessive focus on the concept of wealth tax, right? You're seeing it not just here in California, but around the country. And people essentially read stories about, some billionaire who essentially borrows against their own money, never pays taxes on it, and then just lets their fund absorb, what they borrowed, right? That's how you don't pay taxes, in case any of you have $1 billion and you want to borrow against yourself. And people read that and they get mad. And they think, well, we got to do something about that. Now we're going to do a wealth tax. But of course, a wealth tax becomes a huge problem when most of your wealth is tied up in assets or in your business. And it's not as clear cut. It's not like it's an easy rule to make. I'm opposed, for example, the billionaire tax that's going to be, the initiative is going to be on the ballot here in California. Because I think it's outright the wrong approach. It pushes people out of the state to relocate, somewhere else, whether it's Florida, or Texas. And I tend to think that a better economic policy is to put upward pressure on wages than to, certainly every effort we can take to make sure everybody pays their fair share should be done. But we should also put upward pressure on wages so you strengthen the middle class that way, not not just try to go after this idea of a wealth tax, right? I say to people all the time, again, here's an honest statement from an honest Democrat in California. If having complete, one party control, Democratic Party control, and having all the money, right, and that political control is the answer to our problems, then like the 10 years I spent in the state legislature, where we had super majorities of Democrats, I think either 7 or 8 of the 10 years, and we had multi-billion-dollar surpluses, similar 7 or 8 of those 10 years. Early years when Governor Brown was still there, we were still coming out of kind of a tough economic time, but then once things got cooking, we had, 15 billion, 22 billion, 36 billion in extra money beyond their obligations, right? And during that whole time, we had complete political control. Every statewide office, 2/3 supermajorities. So if Democrats being in charge and having unlimited money solved all our problems, well, then obviously California must have the best roads, the best schools, right? The best public transit, best parks. And we all know that's not true, right? So I think we got to be honest with it. Having said that, when some of my Republican friends get overzealous about their criticisms of California, I have to remind them that, a couple of years ago, we were the 6th largest economy, now we're the 4th. So, keep your shit talking to a certain level, because it doesn't exactly, it's not entirely true, right? But I think, these types of policies that you're talking about, whether it's being a super high tax state, certainly the wealth tax stuff, which I just think functionally doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think you can construct one that makes a ton of sense. I think those are misguided policies, and I think we ought to be working to achieve some kind of a balance, where we have a well-funded government. But I also think the thing that needs the most attention isn't how to generate revenue. Like, we've got a strong economy in this country. California's had a strong economy much of the last decade, and I think we generate a lot of wealth. We generate a lot of tax revenue. I think what we got to really get our arms around is how to make government actually produce better results. Because I think a lot of people's frustrations, certainly high taxes, and the higher you go, and the more intrusive those policies become, you lose people, right? But I think you lose even more people over the fact that we're just not delivering the results, right? You see countries around the world, frankly, where they pay extraordinarily high taxes, higher than California, higher than us. And they get a lot for that. They get programs that work and roads that are nice and schools that are not just good, but great, right? And so I just think we need to spend a lot more of our brain power on making government work a lot better. And then I think the obsession with trying to find more revenue constantly will subside a little bit. And I think that's kind of where some of the abundance thing, that's a little bit what that's about, right? Like, how do you actually build things and let the economy be strong and generate wealth and revenue and all those things? We got to get focused. California shouldn't be 25th on the list in schools if we're the highest taxes. And I think when you're delivering those results, people are really happy with the community they're living in. They're oftentimes probably more willing to pay a little bit higher than somebody else for a community that they want, right? But we don't give nearly enough attention to that. We just constantly look for some golden ticket solution instead of kind of doing the hard oversight work that needs to be done in government to refine, become more efficient, get rid of things that that don't work. I was actually kind of excited at the beginning of this Trump term that when they were getting into what Bill Clinton got into was going in and cleaning out some of the programs, right? The whole Doge effort didn't seem to do much. And then when we got to passing the reconciliation, the big, beautiful bill, so to speak, we added $4 trillion, to the national debt. As my Republican friends said, the Blue Dogs actually wrote a letter to the Republican leadership saying, we will consider voting with you guys on your big bill if you'll sit down with us and talk about how we can have a long-term structured deal to pay down the debt. And the phone never rang, and nobody ever called us to their office, and we ultimately obviously didn't vote for that. They had $4 trillion. So I think we got to dive into government efficiency. And I think the revenue thing will, at least the obsession with it will somewhat take care of itself politically.
We have time for one more.
I saw Joe's hand raised a long time ago. No, you go ahead.
No, reporters don't get to ask questions.
So I'm wondering, do you ever get down to discussing topics that concern the most vulnerable in our communities? I'm thinking it felt like, well, there's so many topics involved with this, but more information was coming out about the Epstein files regarding women and their concerns, and then it's the war. It's, it seems like every day something, so that kind of disappeared. So now we have the situation with Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, the women that were involved. So I'm thinking of this from the term of being a nurse, where I spent my career caring for the most vulnerable in our community, as well as everyone in the rooms, relatives, and we see everyone in the emergency room. So healthcare is so important to you. I know that. And the work that you did with UC Merced and I know we have, our Kaiser representative here. Is there anything happening surrounding the most vulnerable in our communities in the United States? And I'm not talking about just low income or any certain category, or women, children, victims, and healthcare.
I appreciate you bringing it up. As I'm listening, you ask the question, it feels like a glaring hole, in my presentation, in the sense that healthcare has played such a prominent role in this year's, big discussions, right? And a lot of that, feels so long ago in the sense that it was in that reconciliation package where they made huge cuts to the Medi-Cal program, certainly to the food assistance program, a lot of these kind of support services that provide healthcare and other wraparound services to the most vulnerable in our communities. And what that means in our particular community, or at least in this congressional district, is about 2/3 of the population. So 2/3 of the people I represent in this congressional seat are on Medi-Cal, right? And in fact, I gave a speech in opposition. I introduced a bill to restore the Medi-Cal cuts. I introduced a bill to extend the ACA premium tax credits for everyone. And I gave a speech on the floor during the bill, basically saying that even if you don't care about poor people, even if you think poor people can, suffer whatever they need to suffer, if 2/3 of our neighbors are on Medi-Cal, every hospital, every doctor's office, and every, facility is impacted. And thus we're impacted, right? Because if 2/3 of my customers just got their benefits slashed in a way that I can't get paid, well, how can I continue to serve my cash paying customers, my, insured customers, private market insured customers? So it's a massive problem, and it hasn't even begun to be realized yet, because it's going to take a year or two for that to fully kind of play out, in our local healthcare infrastructure. And I know this, Mayor, as well as anyone. And I think it's going to be a major issue, frankly, in this coming midterm election. I think people are very much aware, but partially because they let the premiums go up across, the Affordable Care Act. People are very much aware of the increases in costs. They're not quite yet aware of what they're going to see a reduction in services. Again, that's the part that's got to play out for a while. So that's not necessarily going to have an impact this year in people's minds. But of course, we've all almost forgotten that our healthcare premiums went up because now the gas is $6 or something. It's hard to keep up with the challenges, and those challenges are always the most difficult for the most vulnerable populations who are living paycheck to paycheck or worse and don't have other resources, to rely upon. But I think, after all the work we did for the 10 years in legislature that finally achieved in 2018, the funding of a medical school building, here, the extended hours for our FQHCs that serve a good portion of our community, the gains in local nursing programs, the NP program at Stanford. I mean, all these things that collectively so many people in this community have worked for so that we can have better healthcare, not worse. Because what we have today is not adequate, right? I mean, we've got the city and county of San Francisco has something like 5 times the number of providers, like on an apples to apples comparison, as what we have. And so we were trying to do all of those things to improve the reality here on the ground in the valley, and the reality of these cuts that were made this year in the president's bill is that we're going to see major setbacks, and those setbacks will get worse when California has to start cutting. I mean, you're going to see that in June. They're going to be basically assessing, well, what's that look like for the pass-through money that goes to the states that funds these programs? And there's going to be further potential reductions as the economy. And then when you add in, the gas prices and the stock market fund, that's going to worsen the situation, for state revenue, which is in turn going to worsen. So we're in a really bad cycle, and I'm going to continue to talk about it, particularly with my rural colleagues in both sides of the aisle, because they're largely the most impacted by this. But I know at least the current politics, like, as I was saying, I introduced several bills, can't get those bills out of, they won't be set for a hearing. Nobody wants to deal with that issue, and nobody wants to, take on the president on that particular policy. They kind of want to focus on the tax cuts and some of the other things that, there's good, as with any bill, there's some good stuff and some bad stuff, but they obviously want to focus on the good stuff. And I think, we're going to have to really work hard here in California at every level of government to get through this difficult time until we can get into a place to restore some of that funding, frankly, at the federal level. And there's no easy answers on it. It is hugely challenging, and we're going to bear the brunt of that, certainly in the valley. So.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Wasn't exactly inspirational.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for treating us to lunch. Special thanks to Bill Lyons with Mapes Ranch for co-sponsoring lunch. We appreciate you, sir, very much. As I mentioned earlier, our next guest speaker is Assemblyman Juan Alanis, Friday, March 20th, right here in the chamber. And our next EDC speaker, Wednesday, April 1st, Jessica Hill, City Modesto Director of Community